Hi, everybody. Right, we're going to get started now. I'm just going to switch across to our slides and make sure we introduce everybody for you. So just as we're waiting for everybody to join, I'm just going to run through a quick agenda, and then that'll be the end of hearing from me because I'll pass over to Rebalance Earth CEO Walid Al-Sakaf. So today we're just going to have Walid run through an introduction to Rebalance Earth if you're new here, and importantly, the achievements we've had in 2021 and a little bit about what to expect in 2022. And we're going to switch across to Ralph Chiami to explain a little about the paradigm and everything that's brought us to this point. Then importantly, we've got Ian Redmond's been presenting a little bit on biodiversity and the role that forest elephants play. This is super important to everything that Rebalance has done. It's in part a big part of our branding. Then we're going to have Fabio talking about ecosystem services. This really links the two for me. I think this is a really interesting piece here. And importantly, it's really important to do stuff live in the field. And so we're going to have Kathy talk about the project she's currently working on. Then we're going to talk importantly about the technology. So Tony's going to take over that and talk about the work they've been doing. We're being backed up by R3 and Industria, fantastic partners who've been supporting us up until now. And they're going to talk about tech for good and the role they've been playing. Obviously, we can't build a business without thinking about building an ethical business. So Natalia is going to give us a quick rundown and an overview of everything that her and her team have been working on there as well. It's an important part for us. Then, fantastic, we're going to hear from our partners, Ernst Young, APRU. We've got a short video there to play as well. And then we've got GoCardless, who'll be talking about the recent announcement and the work we've been doing with them. Then Wally is going to wrap that up for us, a nice call to action at the end of what's next, really, and how you can participate. And super importantly, I just want to make let you know that we have a Q&A at the very end of the session, but please submit your questions throughout the session. And if you can, just tag the name of the person you'd like to ask the question to. You can see we have a lot of speakers, and I'll make sure that your question gets to the right person. So Walid, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Red, and welcome everybody. So a little over a year ago, I remember reading an article by the Assistant Director of the IMF, Mr. Ralph Chiami, regarding the valuation of forest elephants and the great whales. In this article, he stated that a great whale is worth $50,000 dead for its meat, but $2 million alive for its carbon sequestration services. Whilst in the forest elephants are worth $40,000 dead for their ivory, but $1.75 million alive for their carbon sequestration services. Today, we have a market for a dead nature, but we do not have one for a living nature. Now, what does that say about our values as a society? We value nature only when it's dead. And for me, that is simply unacceptable. I refuse to accept that my daughters or your children or to grow up in a world with such shoddy values. So I reached out to Ralph and to the internationally renowned conservationist Ian Redmond, who was his 40 years of conservationism under his belt. We decided to join forces because a change is needed. And shortly after that, 60 volunteers from around the world joined us. 60 volunteers who are within this call, across cultures, who have across age groups, have all joined hands to refuse this feeling of being powerless to this existential threat of climate change and biodiversity loss. Together, all of us, we formed Rebalance Earth. And our mission is to fight climate change, protect biodiversity, and lift communities out of poverty. All this can be done by investing in the ecosystem services provided by keystone species such as forest elephants. We are offering the market an interconnected solution to what is an interconnected problem. Too often, we as a society, we face those existential threats through siloed solutions. But just look around you. Nature is highly interconnected. It isn't siloed. Rebalancer's solution fights climate change, protects biodiversity, and lifts communities out of poverty, because these are all interconnected. It is with this vision in place that we've decided also to become a community interest company that is for profit, so that we can constantly reinvest that profit to achieve our mission as fast as possible. whilst at the same time ensuring that we're never acquired and we're never listed in the stock market. We're not here to provide shareholder value. We're here to provide nature value. Because we believe it is equally important to have a great vision, but also it is the manner in which you achieve that vision. And it is because of all of this that in this 1 year, the work of all of our volunteers has gotten us to this point. We've developed amazing partnerships with EY, R3, Industria, the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, Born Free, which you'll be hearing about shortly in this webinar. We partnered with Professor Lee White, the Minister of the Environment for Gabon, for launching a pilot in his country. We participated at a number of international conferences, both online and offline, such as the recent COP26. And we partnered with a team of world-class scientists from Oxford and Stirling University to further our science model. We won our first grant from the Palladium Grant Challenge to finance the building of our blockchain platform. And we signed up our first corporate partner called GoCardless just last month. This is where we are today. For 2022, we've got big plans. We're sending an assessment mission to Gabon at the end of this month, which Kathy will be telling you about. We're inviting corporates to follow in GoCardless' lead to invest in the Rebalance Earth ecosystem tokens, to fight climate change, to protect biodiversity, and to lift communities out of poverty. And we're recruiting new volunteers. And finally, we'll be launching our pilot this year. And I'll be discussing about this a little bit at the end of this webinar. But for now, it is with great pleasure that I'd like to introduce you to the man who essentially started all this, on which the foundation of Rebalance Earth is based on his paradigm. And that is our co-founder, Ralph Chiami, who is based in the United States. Over to you, Ralph.
Thank you, Walid. With this billing, I have to live up to it now. It's really wonderful to be part of this partnership, and it is a partnership. I mean, Walid was the one who brought us together. He says, look, we can do this. So what is it really with all these wonderful people and those of you that are, called in to watch this, is what is it that we're really trying to do? We're just trying to say, in the 5 minutes that I have, is that, as Walid said, nature is not an afterthought. Our economic model, and I'm an economist by training and by profession, we were taught, and I taught, that nature was an externality. That's why even there's a technical expression for that, an externality. That means we sign contracts among each other, we do our business together, and then we look at nature as, oh, we didn't mean to do this damage, so now that we're going to pay a tax or a fine, or we're going to subsidize your good behavior. And what all of this, by thinking nature as an afterthought, or that its nature is there and it's always limitless, boundless in terms of its ability to absorb our behavior, we've reached where we are right now, which is a system that is no longer functioning. And COVID is just one example of what nature is basically pushing back to us, saying enough is enough. You have to change your attitude. You have to recognize that you, just like any other creature on this planet, you have home, and nature is your home. Nature is our home. I'm talking to you, unfortunately, rather than being with you physically from my house. I just had the other day the roofer up here fixing the roof to keep the snow that's coming on Sunday. They tell me there's a big storm coming on Sunday, to keep the water from coming in and to fix the doors so that the wind doesn't come through. It's the same thing. Life is about give and take. We've taken so much. It's time for us to give back while we still have time to do so. So in short, what the paradigm does, it embeds nature in the economic paradigm. It says not that we do our contracts and then we say, oh, what's the impact on nature? No. We do our contract with nature present in the conversation. So whatever we end up doing embeds impact on nature in that decision. And therefore we avoid doing anything that would harm nature, benefit us at the expense of nature. The carbon issue is just what I call the short game. It's just because there's a market for carbon right now, for carbon emission, because it's all about risk reduction of the climate change. But really, Rebalance is much more than that. It's about nature markets. It's about creating a whole economy about what nature offers us. And in order to do so, there is one segment of this society that has been kept out of this conversation. When we talk about conservation in general, it's usually used to be among activists foundations, governments. Okay, who was left out of all of this? Were the markets. Markets were ostracized. I come from the markets. Okay, the what's in it for me crowd. We're kept out of the tent. But to solve the issue of climate, just because climate is upon us, we need everybody inside the tent working together. What Rebalance does, it brings the market inside the tent in a way that does more good than harm. Markets have the resources that governments may not have and have the ability to move fast. So what we're doing is bringing everybody together within this paradigm, says, what do markets need to come into this conversation? If you asked me a few years ago, the markets were not there. Today, everybody is there, from the household to the consumer, to the policymaker, to the investor, everybody's saying, what can we do to solve this problem? Our paradigm solves this problem by saying, this is what the markets need to see in order for us all to solve the problem of today, which is a climate problem and the death or the demise of our natural capital. So what do markets need? Well, the markets need for us to recognize the value, of not just talk about the beauty of nature, but to recognize the value in a language that the markets can understand. Okay, be it whatever it is, right now it's dollars and cents. All you were doing is saying, science tells us now, new science. Fabio is going to come and talk about his wonderful work on the elephants. He's the man who discovered that what the elephants do in the forest elephants. I'm not going to steal his thunder, but he says elephants are incredibly valuable. Okay, Pershing before 2010 talked about how much the whales are valuable. We as financial economists, now we can put dollar amount to those ecosystem services. The services are being offered by these wonderful creatures and systems. And then what we need from there is, once you have it in dollars and cents, to recognize it through the legal system, recognize the right to exist, recognize their right to exist in living their normal lives. Only then the markets say, oh, okay, now these are new systems, these are new assets. Now let's create, we can benefit from these dollar amounts, and therefore the money comes in. But money comes in, let me be very clear on this, how this works, as Walid basically already said it. One is to look after the nature in perpetuity. Very important. We're not in the business of selling assets. We're in the business of recognizing the services that are provided by those natural assets. And two, the money comes in to look after the local communities and indigenous population in perpetuity through meaningful employment and through meaningful income. So our model is a win-win-win. It's a win for nature. It's a win for governments in terms of revenue, if you like. It's a win for the local communities and the indigenous population, who are the true stewards of nature. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Ralph. And it is with great pleasure. I also now would like to invite our other co-founder, Ian Redmond, which I like to refer as a cross of Indiana Jones and David Attenborough. Over to you, Ian.
Thank you, Walid. I wish I could live up to that introduction. The sharp-eyed among you would have noticed that not only do I not know where my mute button is, but I'm surrounded by mountain gorillas. And the reason I'm thrilled to be part of this dynamic team, this partnership, is because 45 years ago this month, I was living in the mountains of Rwanda, working for Dian Fossey, studying the grand and great grandparents of the gorillas behind me. This was filmed a couple of years ago, and the mountain gorillas have thrived. They're one of the few conservation success stories, and they've thrived because they are so fascinating that people have been prepared to pay a lot of money to go and see them. And that model of ecotourism to protect a small population of endangered species is fine if the level of income matches the costs of that conservation and the local communities can benefit from them. But most gorillas live a long way from any tourists, any access to tourists, and therefore that model cannot apply across Africa. And one of the things that I was fascinated by while I was in Rwanda studying the gorillas was the presence of elephants in that same forest elephants. And gradually, as I moved around Africa, I got to visit areas where forest elephants and gorillas interacted ecologically as well as occasionally behaviorally. And this was all seen to be of academic interest. it is fascinating to people to learn about the habits of our near relatives and of species with large brains and complex societies like elephants and whales and dolphins that don't resemble us anatomically, but where we can see parallels in their family behavior. It is fascinating, but it has not, apart from the ecotourism income, been seen as of economic importance, despite the fact that it clearly is. The communities that live around the Virunga volcanoes benefit from the rainwater that falls on those mountains and the slowing of the runoff, which allows streams to continue to flow even during the drier season when there isn't much rainfall because of the giant sponge on the mountain. And we've talked for years about the ecological importance of gorillas and elephants in maintaining that. Carbon wasn't even part of our thinking back then. I'm thrilled that Fabio is following this presentation because he can talk about the science, but let us just think of what this is doing on a broader scale. I've spent much of the last 45 years asking people for money because conservation has been funded by the philanthropic sector, families who at the end of the month have paid all their bills, they've got a few quid left and they might give it to a charity, and some of those charities might help wildlife and some of those might be actually helping gorillas. So it's a subset of a subset of a subset that gets a philanthropic dollar. Or, governments pay for conservation in national parks, and they do that from taxpayers' dollars or aid money in the case of developing countries. And again, conservation tends to be at the bottom of the list of priorities. There's health, there's defense, there's education, there's development, all these important things, transport. And if there's a little bit left at the end, we should really help save nature. But it's not perceived to be important. Suddenly, because of the growing awareness of the threat of climate change and the growing awareness of the threat of biodiversity loss, there is a rising up of the status of that problem in the priorities of both philanthropists and governments. But as Ralph said, the ecology is seen as an externality. And what Rebalance Earth has the potential to do, and we are going to make it happen because we're all very determined in our different ways, is to internalize the cost of conservation so that when you go out and buy a bottle of wine or a loaf of bread or a laptop or a phone, the company that makes those products has already balanced their carbon budget by investing in nature through Rebalance Earth. And you, the customer, you may still decide to give to a charity at the end of the month. And as a trustee of several charities, I hope you do. But the main cost of conservation can come, as Ralph says, through the markets, so that consumers, whatever they're consuming, know that a chunk of the money that they're buying a product for is going to protect the ecosystems that provide the services that keep us all alive. So it's about ensuring we have a functional biosphere. The biosphere is a thin film of life on the big ball of rock we call home, Earth, and that's the bit we have to protect. And within that biosphere, the keystone species that hold the ecosystems together are what we're focusing on. And for one example of that, forest elephants, it's now Fabio's turn to explain what he discovered in one of the most exciting and perhaps world-changing discoveries around.
Thank you, Ian. And it is with great pleasure that I'm going to introduce now Fabio Bazzaghi, who is based in France, about how his revolutionary work has provided the grounding of the science on which Rebalance Earth is based upon. So Fabio, the mic is yours.
Thanks for the introduction. What I was saying is that it's not so intuitive to relate elephants or other animals to carbon, because it's easier to think about a tree that does photosynthesis, takes CO2 from the atmosphere and converts into carbon. But I've got this question a lot of time, how are elephants related to carbon, and how does that come into place when we discuss about climate change? So I just wanted to give you a bit more information so it becomes a bit more intuitive, because I realized that initially it cannot be so intuitive. Still today, most of the science that deals with how our planet works completely ignores what animals are doing. So if I can just share my screen for a second. I can tell you a bit here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. So thanks, Walid, for the slide. By the way, how do elephants become these engineer of tropical forest? Well, now we've known quite a bit about forest elephants. We've known for years that they're really important in dispersing seeds. They eat a lot of different fruit. They poop these seeds in a nice environment that allows these seeds to germinate. But lately, we've been learning about other ways in which elephants interact with the forest. And these services the elephants provide are actually indirectly or directly connected to carbon. So the first in 2019, we discovered that elephant disturbance, which is basically the way the elephant interact with the forest, you might think it might be a negative effect, right? Because if you think about this huge animal that goes through the forest, it knocks down trees, it pulls branches, stumps small trees, and so on. Well, it might be counterintuitive, but actually all these interactions with the forest generate a 7% increase in the carbon stored in the forest. Why? Because when you have too many trees, these trees are competing for light, for water, for nutrients. So once you reduce the number of trees in the forest, you get this additional effect of 7%. Think about some forest plantation, in the forest plantation just outside your city, all these trees nice and lined up perfectly. They're planted in such a way to maximize productivity. And so a forest elephant acts a bit like a forest manager, if you will. Now, recently, we have discovered other ways in which elephants contribute to carbon storage in forests. So the second way is through dispersal. Elephant disperse lots of trees, but the ones that are preferred by elephants, which are eaten a lot and dispersed a lot, actually are huge trees. The biggest trees in the forest in Central Africa are actually dispersed by elephants. So if we don't have elephants, those trees will have a hard time to create the new generation of trees in the forest. And we have estimated this is between 5 and 12% will be lost if we lose these elephant dispersed trees. And then the other part is how and what elephants eat. And actually this is because elephants like to feed on trees that have a low carbon potential. So basically they allow trees that store more carbon to grow, and they eat trees that store less carbon. So as you can see now, we are discovering more and more about how animals, and in this case elephants, contribute to carbon. Here we only have one species, and we still haven't got to maybe a very important part, which is how they fertilize the soil, so they help plants grow even faster. So this is just really an overview, and we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg. I was at COP26, and basically it seemed the only solution, and this is where I really want to come and link with what I think Rebalance is an incredible endeavor. At COP26, it seems the only solution was to plant trees. We plant trees and we save the planet. Well, in reality, if you just plant trees, you're a forest plantation. That's not a real ecosystem. It doesn't provide any other benefit aside from storing carbon for a while and then, maybe an insect that likes that type of tree, or a pest comes and just destroys the whole thing, or there's a fire. Anyway, we need to think, my message is that we need to think about nature in its complexity, and using forest elephants or using some charismatic species helps us to conserve the whole ecosystem with all its services. So just planting trees, it's not really a holistic approach, and that's why I like Rebalance, because it comes from the perspective that by protecting animals, protecting an important species, we can benefit the whole ecosystems and the people living around it. And with that, I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Fabio. And I think it perfectly illustrates, nature is interconnected. You got to have an ecosystem view to facing the challenges we have. Fabio's great work has enabled us to identify that 7% increase in carbon offset. But as he pointed out, there's still a lot more work to identify all those other services, which is something that Rebalance Earth will be taking a lead on that. But now I would like to invite also Kathy Lynn Austin, who is based out of the United States and who is also the founder of the Conflict Awareness Project, for her to tell us about the assessment mission that we're sending at the end of this month to Gabon. Over to you, Kathy.
Thanks. Well, first, I just want to say a big hello to everyone who's joining us on this incredible Rebalance Earth journey. I'm really excited to share a little bit about myself and my veteran experience and why I'm leading this mission to Gabon at the end of the month. But what I really want to instill with you is that this is Rebalance Earth's live action plan. So I want to give you that glimpse into what we'll be doing to set up our Gabon pilot project. The thrill of this all begins on the ground, and we hope you'll be following us as we progress this journey, really. It's just so great to start the new year with this mission ahead of us, to show that we're really rolling up our sleeves, and that together we're going to not acquiesce, right, to helplessness and hopelessness and fear, but we're actually going to make a huge planetary difference with the Rebalance movement. So to do that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how that all begins, at least for me, with the design and the setup of our pilot project in a portion of what is called the world's second green lung, zoning in on Africa's Congo Basin rainforest and in the eye of the storm in Gabon. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm leading this assessment mission. As Walid said, I am the founder and executive director of the Conflict Awareness Project. We're based in the US, but all of our work is global, in hotspots and in fragile states. And it's within the conservation community, but also the peace and security realm and the development realm. So we're bringing in all these skill sets with us as we lead this team forward. I've been a veteran in the conservation field like Ian. He's got 10 years more than I do. So for me, it's 30 years. But really what I have gained a reputation for is not only going out and scoping and kind of being on the front line with assessments, but also designing pilot projects and staying on board and ensuring their sustainability. And we can only do that by finding the best local staff and engaging all the Gabonese stakeholders that we can. In the conservation space, I started out my journey very early in the late 1980s and early 1990s, helping secure the first ivory ban at the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. And more recently, I uncovered and exposed the gun running network that was fueling rhino poaching all across Southern Africa. So what I want to say is, wildlife traffickers in Gabon, beware, we're coming for you. But in this context, and while I was sort of the last mission looking at this illegal rhino horn trade, one of the things that I found out was that all too often the local communities were being left behind in conservation efforts. And they were actually often erroneously being blamed for what was being carried out really by large-scale criminal gangs, traffickers, and corrupt officials in cahoots. So this is one of the reasons why I came on board Rebalance Earth. I want to be sure that local communities remain front and center of our efforts, both from the conservation and protection side, and that they're part, as Ralph has mentioned, the markets, that they have more engagement in the formal economies and are not left desperate and impoverished. So we'll continue to build on all of this expertise. With Rebalance Earth, I had the Protection, Security, and Local Communities Working Group, and it's in this capacity that I'll be going to Gabon. So let me just tell you about that Gabon mission briefly. So before I do want to give a big shout out to all the American donors and philanthropists who funded this trip. Hopefully in the future, as Ralph, Fabio, Ian has mentioned, conservation will not only have to rely and be dependent on conservationists and philanthropists and your sort of local families at the end of the month giving their small change. Hopefully the markets, big business, our investors, those who are going to be on this journey with us will be part of that ride. But right now, we're basing this assessment mission, we're undertaking it based on the American donor community. Let me say the mission to Gabon has both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So Rebalance Earth is all about a holistic methodology, engaging all of the stakeholders from the top to the bottom, from the bottom to the top. At the top, our mission is being coordinated directly by the Office of the Minister of the Environment. So what does this mean? That we have right access right from the beginning, and that we can be efficient. We can cut down our costs so that all the money is rightfully spent on protecting those elephants and in ensuring local community engagement and development. This partnership with the Ministry of Environment means we'll stay in step and in tune and in sync also with the Congo Basin region as a whole, and with the international community who are concerned for biodiversity loss and climate change mitigation. Besides the Ministry of Environment, we'll be working directly with the national parks agencies. They're the ones who manage and protect those elephants, and we will be traveling over rough terrain in remote areas, probably getting stuck in the mud since it is the rainy season, but we want to ensure that we have full situation awareness of everything it takes to fight those wildlife criminals and ensure those elephants are well secured. The Ranger Corps and the Eco Guards will be direct beneficiaries, so we need to hear directly from them what their challenges and needs are. Last but not least, obviously most important, it's absolutely vital to our Gabon mission to spend as much time as we can to engage the local communities living close to the elephant populations. They are our main beneficiaries, and the strength of our Rebalance Earth approach is that our local communities working group is well-versed in both human rights-based and need-based approaches. So from the start, our goal is to try and overcome past inequities, ensure everyone at the ground level feels their voice has been heard. We want to advance gender equality as much as we can, and at the same time, not raise undue expectations, since putting our ecosystem services plan in place will require time. So whether they want schools, hospitals, better roads, access to the formal market economy, or to work directly with the national parks agencies as eco guards or conservation participants, we will listen to what their lead is. Finally, in conclusion, I just want to say We're all on this exciting journey as change makers together. So if you want to continue to support Rebalance Earth, follow us on this mission. We'll be sending you social media postcards, and we'll be giving you glimpses of what it's like on the ground. So not only do we promise to show you elephants and gorillas and ancient rainforest habitats, we will also probably have a few stuck in the mud moments together, but that's the exciting part of this world-changing adventure. So thanks for joining us on this journey.
Thank you, Kathy. And talking about the minister, Lee White, we actually got a short video we'd like to share with you from Gabon. But please don't hesitate in the meantime to also add your questions in the Q&A section, and we will be addressing them at the end. Thank you. Red?
Gabon is 88% covered by tropical rainforests. In 1990, we estimated we had 65,000 elephants. And the forest elephants of Gabon are the gardeners of the forest. They make the trails, they make the clearings, they plant seeds, they increase the productivity of the rainforest, and therefore they increase the carbon stocks of the rainforest. Whilst all across forested Africa, elephants have been massacred over the last 30 years, Gabon, through its protection of the elephants, through the President Ali Bongo's efforts to preserve nature, we've actually been able to raise our forest elephant population. And so, working with Rebalance Earth, we've created a nature sandbox, which will give people the opportunity to invest in that increased carbon stock that the elephants are creating, to enable us to better conserve the elephants and to accompany rural people and make their lives better. Join us in this incredible endeavor.
Thank you. Now, we've heard about the science, about the paradigm. We've heard about Kathy's mission. And now we're going to hear, I would like to invite Tony Vernal, who works at the London Stock Exchange Group. He's based in the UK, and he's going to explain about the role blockchain technology plays in this whole enterprise. Over to you, Tony.
Well, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining this call. I'm basically going to run through not just the blockchain technology, but also a little bit of the other elements of technology will require as well to make this all happen. So one of the main bits of technology that we will need is to be able to identify individual elephants. Initially, this will be done using collared elephant location data. The aim, though, is to develop non-intrusive ways of identifying individual elephants. For example, physically, using dung DNA sampling, visually via field cameras, or acoustically through audio monitoring, to name but a few methods we are currently looking at. Now, where the blockchain comes into the picture is we're going to use it to manage the flow of funding from source to destination. We'll be using a permission blockchain, or as I like to refer to it, a DLT. This ensures trust, traceability, and transparency of the shared records between multiple parties on the platform who do not necessarily know each other. This enables participants to trust in the technology and not unknown parties, and to be safe in the knowledge that what they see is what their counterparties are seeing. Digital uniqueness is also provided to prevent double issuing and double spending. This is ensured through the DLT's use of cryptography and consensus. On a private ledger, all participants have a known identity on the platform, enabling a stakeholder-agreed governance framework to be put in place to handle any system or dispute management issues that crop up and need to be resolved. The Rebalanced Earth distributed ledger, or blockchain, as some others like to call it, runs the business model using 3 types of fungible tokens to represent and track the flow of funds from investors to local communities, elephant protection, and cohabitation. In summary, the DLT will be the engine that enables programmatic running of the business model. The potential addressable natural capital marketplace for countries will be in the region of billions of dollars and will be overseen by governments, and regulatory bodies who will be more comfortable using a governance-controlled private digital ledger. We evaluated various blockchains and chose R3's Corda Enterprise, which is currently being used by the financial markets and central banks to build global markets infrastructure. This, of course, is no coincidence, as Corda was developed from the ground up by a consortium of financial market experts, and their requirements are firmly embedded in Corda's DNA. Once the Rebalance Earth platform is built, it will help the global community manage the value of their natural capital through science-based models, releasing value to local communities based on desired outcomes. Corda also enables a much better privacy model by only letting the participants that need to see the data store that data. It has a large developer community and also has the largest permissioned DLT production ecosystem. We are currently working with Industria, who are part of that ecosystem, to build the DLT token engine. R3 also put a big emphasis on interoperability in their design thinking, which will enable cross-blockchain workflows in the future. Other technology partners we are also looking to work with are Salesforce for a CRM or customer relationship management solution to onboard and manage client data, and Microsoft Azure as a potential infrastructure provider to manage and run the DLT and sensor data network platform. I've had to be light on the detail in this 5-minute overview. If you would like to know more, you can join the Rebalance Guardians and raise any questions in the technology channel, or raise them in the Q&A session at the end of this call. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Tony. And it is with great pleasure now I'd like to invite Mark Rains from R3 to tell us a little bit about R3 and how you're going to be supporting Rebalance Earth. And that's going to be quickly followed by Petko Permochev from Industria, who is based in Bulgaria. Just wanting to emphasize how we have a very distributed and global team around the world. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Waleed. So my name is Mark Rains and I work with the solutions team at R3. And as Waleed mentioned, I just want to talk a little bit about why R3 are involved in this project and how our technology is applicable to some of the problems that we need to solve. So as Tony's already mentioned, our core platform, which is known as Corda, is currently being used to drive efficiency and transparency across to many of today's financial markets. Now, as Tony also mentioned, a key part of what we do with this technology is the tokenization of different types of financial assets. So in the traditional markets, that's typically things like cash, bonds, stocks, derivatives, those kinds of things. So Corda enables you to issue these assets and then manage them throughout their life cycle, whilst ensuring that fundamental constraints and rules are enforced. So things like who is allowed to create these assets, how many of them are allowed to be created, under what conditions can they be transferred or moved between parties, and under what conditions can they be redeemed. Anything that you could think of that might be important for a given asset, Corda will enforce those rules. And crucially, these rules are enforced and they're maintained without the need for any particular central party or central point of coordination, which is obviously very, very important when there's value at stake. But this technology is equally applicable outside of traditional financial markets. Many of the problems that we solve are equally relevant for projects like Rebalance Earth. For example, the issuance and management of carbon offset tokens, the tracking of wildlife and biodiversity metrics, the facilitation of secure payments to the communities that need them, and so on. So we're working very closely with Waleed and his team to apply our technology, our expertise and experience and the tools that we've built, and helping them realize their vision. And I think I can speak for everyone at R3 when I say we're very excited to be involved in this project and helping to contribute in some way to creating a better world for everyone. Alongside that work, we're also inviting our partners. We have a very, very large partner network, and we're inviting them to join forces with us in this project. And as an example of that, I'm going to hand over to Petko, who's going to talk about how Industria are getting involved as well.
Thank you, Mark. Over to you, Petko.
Yeah, Thank you, Walid. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Tony, for the kind words. First of all, happy birthday. My name is Permochev, and I'm the CEO of Industria. We are one of the strategic partners of Archery, and we kind of bring a lot of enterprise blockchain and distributed ledger solutions towards various industries across the world. We do a lot of banking and central bank digital currency stuff. We do a lot of insurance. We also work on the electronic bill of lading, a bit of boring thing for many of the participants on this call, and a lot of trade finance stuff. We do also capital markets. I know Walid for probably 4 or 5 years already, and we've been trying to kind of work many times. Our first meeting was at Beasley in London, but when I've heard, was it more than a year ago, about Rebalance Earth and what Walid, Ralph, and Ian were doing, I kind of instantly became interested. In a world that it's increasingly kind of threatened by various challenges like climate change and ecosystem destruction and deforestation, and which might lead to a mass extinction of a huge size. And we saw with Walid, we've been talking many times before even the product was set up, that probably carbon credits and the existing carbon offsetting markets don't probably seem to be working quite well. They're probably plaque a bit because of there's a lack of transparency, and there are a number of middlemen trying to make a very quick buck from this. So we've been talking. I mean, there was a moment of time I've been talking to Walid more than my wife, and he shared all of his observations and the frustration from the way the system worked. And we all later met with Ralph and Ian, and I'm very happy that that we are on board. We are a DLT kind of a company. I've never, and we as a group, as a bunch of people, we never imagined that the carbon offsetting could become a mechanism to fund the protection of a keystone species, vice versa. I've never thought that an elephant could become such an important factor when it comes to protecting the environment. Walid, you mentioned the figures. So Rebalance Earth is what we've believed is one of the first projects to kind of bridge the biodiversity and the real economy and and it has a kind of a big social impact by helping even locals and not changing the nature, but kind of preserving it. I'll be very cautious with the timing. Obviously, we do a lot of things, very interesting technical stuff like defining carbon tokens and credits, and kind of coding different attributes, testing, tokenization, etc. A lot of things that make me, and I'm the least important person in this room, but my team kind of interested a lot. There's a really phenomenal combination of Internet of Things and blockchain, which is remarkable. In a nutshell, we would like to kind of create a system and help Walid and the rest of the team create a system that provides trust, transparency, and traceability. And what I really like in this call, and this is something that Walid managed to do, it's collaboration. And I also want to thank Archery for their wonderful platform and the fact that Archery provided a lot of volunteers to support the project on an absolutely voluntary basis. As a conclusion, I would like to just rob Walid for a few words. Be human, have love, give hope, and again, happy birthday, Rebalance Earth.
Thank you, Petr. Thank you, Mark. So you've heard about the science, you've heard about the technology, and now you need to hear about the heart, the soul, the code of ethics that Rebalance Earth has. And I'm delighted to invite Natalia Niculescu to take the mic. She works at Generali and she's based in Italy. Over to you, Natalia.
Thank you, Walid, and a big hello to everyone. Thank you, Petko, that you have anticipated our mantra, which is indeed to be human, have love, and give hope. This in practice, what does it mean? It means that really our focus is to make this a human movement in order to really allow us to live in balance with nature. And in the same time, we really want to give a message of hope for a different future that we can create only together. Last but not least, it has to have a concrete impact on communities. RBE's ethical approach is all about making sure that our core values and principles are implemented in our work, and of course that we learn and improve together without losing track of our biggest purpose. We have developed our first ethical charter and code of conduct to guide us, and to enforce it, we plan to build an independent ethical advisory board, and I will get to that in a moment. Of course, we recognize that this business model, this idea is new and innovative. So this is likely to raise new and maybe critical ethical issues that we might encounter. Hence, we want to keep our eyes and minds open and work iteratively to identify these potential ethical issues and how to address them. Moving on, let me share with you our core values, because our ethical charter is rooted in our 8 core values. And these values, it's important to remember they follow us in whatever we do, and they stand on 3 main pillars. First of all, as mentioned, we want to live in balance with nature. This implies that we aim to act with compassion and really recognize interdependencies. So if we want to receive benefits from nature, we should give something back. Of course, we need to also raise our game to change the future. So we do so by acting with integrity. It has been mentioned earlier, collaborating, developing the capacity to be resilient to global changes, and also think differently by embracing real innovation. And last but not least, it's very important to repair and restore our human community. Kathy has mentioned this a lot, by promoting equity and inclusion of the local communities. Moving on, let's see which are our ethical approaches that actually stand at the core of our ethical charter. First of all, in terms of rights and duties, we aim to do no harm. And we do so by protecting the rights of nature, the rights of local communities, and the rights of our future generation. I remember all the time Walid is mentioning his daughters, and it's important to think also what happens after us. Common good. We do believe there is no progress if only one benefits. Therefore, we really strive to find the right benefit balance for both human and nature systems. And looking at the long-term impact, this means we want to include all stakeholders, both in the decision-making, but also in profit sharing. Last but not least, fairness and justice. Our processes should be inclusive and aim to build trust with and within the communities. We really want to leave these communities better than when we found them, and also to make sure that our work is not complicit in human rights abuses. Moving on, let's see how our ethical advisory board will work in practice. As mentioned earlier, the goal of the board is really to review all the research, work, pilots, and active programs that we may have, and actually help us to have a strong oversight of any ethical implication. This means that we need to work in identifying and classifying new and potential ethical issues. The ethical advisory board will be advising our leadership, but also partners. And we want it to be independent in order to provide advisory that is both proactive and prompted. As process, we plan to run all our key important decisions by the group, and do so in an iterative process that will include also the annual voting of the ethical charter, which, as mentioned, is a living document. In terms of membership, it will be composed by an EG chair and key reviewers, and we do want to have a diverse outlook on potential ethical issues. That's why it's critical for us to have members out of scientific, business, technology, and local communities. So this is also an important message to all of you attending. We do want with us strong voices and expertise, and this is in the same time an open call as we are currently recruiting and forming our ethical advisory board. So we do want, let's say, strong minds and hearts that can challenge us across the board so we can make this better and better. So thank you to all, and back to you, Walid.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Perfect. Now we're going to go into the next section of this webinar, which is about our partners for good. And it is with great pleasure that I'm inviting now Tom Bottomley from EY. You're based in the UK. So tell us a little bit about yourself and also why EY is participating in this.
Thanks so much, Walid. Yeah, it's great to be on. So yeah, as mentioned, I work at EY in the consulting practice and as a manager, but lucky enough since January to have seconded in to the wonderful Rebalance family, working on some tactical areas as they scale into 2022. Mainly the focus now is getting the message out. So it's been holding interviews, group and one-to-one with prospective clients, which has been very interesting, and a follow-up survey to drive further insights, conducting a market scan, looking at trends in the voluntary carbon market, and ultimately helping to develop some kind of customer engagement materials. This secondment supported by EY to look at particularly innovative startups that are helping to directly address UN SDGs. Of course, Rebalance is right at the center of that. But on a personal level, completely drawn to this organization, given how ambitious it is, the pace at which it's moving, and ultimately the roadmap ahead is just so compelling. I just really wanted to get involved. And whether it's from the angle of getting different academic institutions, financial teams, corporate partners together on one solution, through to how clever, how future-proof the blockchain solution underpinning this is. And it was great to learn about it just now in more detail. Also through to how Rebalance is looking to really shift the mindsets of individuals and corporates from philanthropy through to actually investing into biodiversity is really important, and it's an exciting journey to be on. And ultimately just chatting through with Walid earlier this week, how the climate crisis, there needs to be the value of natural capital, it needs to be better explained, it needs to be recognized, and there needs to be a new kind of system to channel that investment. And I think Rebalance Earth is kind of uniquely positioned to help with this. So going forward, beyond the secondment, I'm really looking forward to being a vocal advocate as a volunteer, and it's been great so far. So much more to come. Thanks, Walid.
Thank you so much, Tom, and it's absolutely wonderful, to have you on board. For our next partner for good, we've got Christopher Tremewan, who is the CEO of the Association of Pacific Rim Universities. Now, as he's based in Hong Kong, it is quite late for him at the moment, so he kindly sent us a video, which I'll let Red play for us.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting APRU to be present on this wonderful occasion of your first anniversary of Rebalance Earth. I'm the Secretary General of APRU, Chris Tremewan, and it's my pleasure to have worked with you during this past year, and also to congratulate all of you, the founders, volunteers and partners, for achieving so much over this time, and the various wonderful initiatives you've come up with. We're most appreciative of this. Just to let you know, APRU, for those who don't know, the Association of Pacific Rim Universities is an association or a network of 61 leading research universities around the Pacific Ocean. So the coast of North and South America, all those countries, and China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So we circle the Pacific. And naturally, we have a very intense interest in the key challenges that face our region. And one of our key priorities is clearly the climate change agenda. And so we have a great interest in what Rebalance Earth is doing. And we know that, as you do, that this region of the Asia Pacific harbors a substantial proportion of the Earth's 9 million species and has a number of biodiversity hotspots. And so we also have programs, including a biodiversity program that addresses these issues on the basis of the considerable research depth of our members and the links between them on these issues. And we're trying very hard to work with the Secretariat of the Pacific Region Economic Program based in the South Pacific on some of these issues and on the keystone species in the Pacific. So congratulations again. We look forward to involving ourselves, more than 2 million students and more than 200,000 faculty members in your work as is appropriate in the years ahead, and to connecting with you on these very successful schemes that you're coming up with and will be implementing in the years ahead. So congratulations again, our warmest wishes, and we look forward to our future partnership with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for your support. And it is now my greatest pleasure to invite our partner and our first customer, GoCardless. We're delighted to have Ben Knight, Head of Sustainability at GoCardless, join us. For those of you who haven't seen it, we published yesterday the video interview we did with Ben. But for now, Ben, the mic is yours.
Thanks, Walid, and hello everyone. Good afternoon and good morning and happy New Year and happy birthday to Rebalance. And thank you for the invite. It's great to be here. Yeah, so I'm Ben. I'm Head of Sustainability here at GoCardless. If you haven't heard of us, we're a global fintech. We've got around 70,000 customers worldwide. We move around $20 billion worth of payments a year. But previously to joining GoCardless, I actually first read Ralph's paper actually back in 2019, and I still, even yesterday, I was referencing it in a presentation to some of my colleagues. They were quite pleased to hear about phytoplankton and the carbon sequestration of phytoplankton and things like that. So, and I actually then first met and found out about Rebalance over a year ago. And straight away, it really struck a chord with me. So obviously I work in corporate sustainability, but I'm an environmentalist at heart as well. And on a personal level, Walid, we spend a lot of time talking about this, but my daughter, who's just turned 7, she would love your background picture, by the way, elephants. She's always drawing elephants at the moment for some reason. But I recently asked her what grown-ups should do to help the natural world and the planet, and her answer was really succinct. She just said, stop killing animals and cutting down trees, and in that order as well. So yeah, from a personal level, I think Rebalance really strikes a chord with me. But yeah, I joined GoCardless back in the summer of last year, and straight away as we started building our sustainability strategy, obviously we've got our own net zero strategy, our own making sure we're reducing our own impact. But the wider scope of things is making sure that we can create as much value beyond that. And really importantly, that's not just looking at climate and carbon, but how can we also create value for biodiversity and communities? Because, well, as you mentioned, we're all interconnected. I guess the way I like to see it is that climate and biodiversity are the flip side of the same coin. So for me, it's really important that whatever we're doing, we're considering everything holistically. So when we got to just before Christmas, and my colleagues and my customer team came to me and said, we really want to do something for our 70,000 customers, but we want to align it with what we're now doing on sustainability. Firstly, I was really pleased that my embed sustainability in the business strategy was already paying off within a few months. But it was great that straight away my colleagues are thinking about that. And again, they weren't just talking about, shall we go and plant some trees? As Fabio mentioned earlier, there's a lot of focus on that in the corporate community. Can we plant a tree to offset what we're doing without real consideration for ecosystems and communities? So I was really pleased that through a bit of hard work with Walid and Wills from the other team, we came up with the idea of, can we gift the idea of protecting elephants or gifting elephant time to our 70,000 customers, and really communicating why that's important. Because I guess a lot of our customers will have heard about the climate crisis, but probably not so familiar as to why we're all interconnected with biodiversity loss and the need for bringing communities out of poverty as well, as you mentioned, Walid. And I think those three things intertwined are so important. And that's why, for me, on a personal level and from a business perspective, why what you're doing is so amazing. And this, what we did before Christmas, was just a very a small step. I hope that as time progresses and we build our own strategy, we can find bigger ways of collaborating further. So it's great to hear about everything you're doing, and I will continue to be a massive advocate, and I will continue to tell our customers and all of our partners about what you're doing and advocate to support biodiversity in communities in conjunction with climate action. And, yeah, carry on, and look forward to seeing what happens next.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ben. That really means a lot. And I want to thank also all our partners, who you've heard of, for supporting us in our mission. So many of you on this call, or those of you who are watching the recording of it, you need to understand is that you all have the power to change our values as a society, from one that values nature only when it's dead to one that is not just alive, but thriving. You have the power to join an organization that is grounded in science, embedded in ethics, and who uses innovative technologies to offer transparency, traceability, and trust in its solution. And if, like Ben, you are a head of sustainability in your organization, we invite you to follow in GoCardless lead and invest in those keystone species ecosystem services to fight climate change, to protect biodiversity, and to lift communities out of poverty. Alternatively, if you have skills as a social media manager, as a marketeer, as a project manager, or as a fundraiser, we kindly invite you to join Rebalance as a volunteer to help us accelerate our momentum. We are a growing team of volunteers, and we need to continue this momentum. If you want your organization to invest in Rebalance, we're going to be attaching a short summary on Rebalance Earth that you can use and share with your organization's head of sustainability for them to become aware of what we do at Rebalance and how they could participate with us. And we're going to be also providing a link for all of these options in the chat box for you to access in your own time at a later stage. In this fight against climate change and biodiversity loss, we do not have to be powerless. We can be empowered. We can have a meaningful impact. All that is needed is to take that first step, just like GoCardless has done, because together we can win. And I want to take a moment to give my heartfelt thanks to my co-founders, Ralph and Ian, and to the working group coordinators, and to all the volunteers for all of their hard work in getting us this far. Remember, we're all volunteers. We have to squeeze a few hours here and there between our active working life and our active personal life. And I thank you for all of those sacrifices you have made. Some of us, our parents, like Ben or even Mark, I could see, the picture of your kids in the background. And we are fighting, to make sure we give them a better legacy than the one we presently have. Our ambition is very bold. We recognize that. But as Natalia mentioned, and Pekko also, every one of us at Rebalance Earth are united by our three principles: to be human, to have love, and to give hope. So I ask you to join us in the most ambitious adventure of our lifetime, to reverse the decline in nature, to safeguard the future of our generation and our kids' generation, so that we can finally live in balance with nature. This has to change, and we can do it together. So I'm going to thank you again, everyone, for staying with us in this webinar, and we will now open up the floor to Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Walid. We've already had some great questions already flying in. The panel have already been responding to a lot of them. But let's start off with, I believe, Ian, you answered someone's question, but it'd be great for everyone else to be able to hear that as well. Ian, there was a question for you from Jacob Doetleff. I think he had to drop off, but I think this is an important question for everyone. Jacob's question was, as far as I know, intact ecosystems are net carbon neutral. I don't sequester any carbon from atmosphere, but just store a certain stock of carbon. Ian, did you want to go through your answer that you gave to Jacob? And I know, Fabio, you answered it. You answered as well, added to it as well. So there's a lot of material there. So one of you would like to lead. That'd be great. Ian, you might not be on.
The key word is intact. There are very few intact ecosystems. So what we are hoping to do is to prevent the further degradation of ecosystems and to allow those which have been depleted of their elephants or other keystone species to recover and become more efficient. So one of the problems with the solution people have proposed that we need to plant more trees is that most cultivatable land is already cultivated, or it already has trees on it. Where are you going to plant the new ones? What we're doing is making the trees that currently exist more efficient by allowing nature to do what nature does, the interaction of animals and plants. And Fabio might want to add to that. I didn't see your additional reply, but do you want to jump in, Fabio?
Yeah, I just want also to say that in some places like in northern Siberia, or it's not, the solution is not just always trees. It's exactly what Ian said: restore the original ecosystems. We might plant trees in some place, but actually grasslands in the northern part of the world are more efficient at storing carbon. We have a huge storage of methane under Siberia and under the northern latitude, and they're planting restoring the original grassland with large animals that graze this land. Is actually better than planting trees. So I think exactly what Ian said is we need to first restore what we can do, and then expand in a way that makes sense, and not just with a one-fits-all strategy.
Thank you, guys. That really interesting. So Walid, I've got a question for you here, and I think I think you know the answer to it. The question is, will the carbon certificates be certified by a third party? I know that we're exploring certification. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So effectively, certification here is to provide this element of trust. Did you do what you claim to do? And that's the beauty, if you want, of the blockchain platform, is that every time a corporate client, a household, or capital markets purchases an ecosystem services token, they will be able to see which elephant produced that token on what day. You can see a picture, you can see a video, you can hear a sound file, or even in some cases, a DNA sample of that elephant. So we can prove to you that this has happened on that day. But of course, we recognize that, you do need to work with independent third parties. So we have had numerous conversations with Vera, which is similar to the gold standard, but I have a deeper relationship, in terms of measuring the carbon offsets of forests. So we're looking to leverage two standards they have, which is the VCS, the Voluntary Carbon Standard, and the CCB, which is the Climate, Community, and Biodiversity Standard. I hope that's answered your question.
That's perfect. That's the answer I was looking for. Ben, we've actually got a question here for you. I think this is best targeted for you. But Walid, you may want to join in on this as well. The question is from Lisa and says, how does GoCardless function so that its customers contribute to Rebalance Earth's mission? I know you mentioned briefly about gifting, but maybe you wanted to go into a bit more depth.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess we, my colleagues in our customer team ordinarily would give a gift every year to our customers, whether that's a card sent to them or something like that. But we're going to try and do something that created value, really, and specifically value for the natural world and community. So working with Willie, we decided that we would take that and essentially work out what it would take in tokens. So the agreement to pre-purchase tokens, but how would that equate to 1 minute per customer? There's a little bit of maths involved, but essentially we've agreed to pre-purchase those tokens when they become available. If I phrase that correctly, Walid, you might want to.
Yes, that's exactly that. But I think for us, the bigger picture, whether it is with GoCardless or any other corporate within their own specific industry, is we're running these kind of design thinking workshops or ideation workshops, if you want, where a client can invite all the members within their value chain, whether it is their suppliers, whether it is their partners, whether it is their customers, and if the game, why not their competitors, so that together as an industry ecosystem, they can collaborate in designing new solutions that is fundamentally based on those eco tokens. And if you have, let's say, a dominant player, like for example, a Walmart or a Maersk, within the industry, they will have the opportunity to co-brand those tokens and distribute them to their players within their value chain? Thank you for your question.
Tony, this one's for you and maybe for Mark and Petro. This one's so offset tokens are bought by the market / corporate partners. Do they then expire once the money has been spent? Hope that makes sense. This might be a bit technical for today, but I know you've answered that one, Tony, so maybe you want to pick that up.
Yeah, sure. I mean, everything is fluid currently as we're designing the contracts, but the intention currently is that the purchaser of the eco services token will consume the offset of that token. But there is some debate around whether we open up to a secondary market, and we'll have some healthy discussions around that. You know, does that slow down the progress of actually offsetting because you don't use it for its intended purpose, and there's a time lag, and it's, you know, that addressing the climate warming problem issue is, it's all about speed, and you don't want to have, in the Bitcoin world, hodl your value. You want to have it instantly reduced so that someone else can then go and reduce more by buying another token rather than it swimming around in a marketplace. So I hope I'll stop there because I can get.
Thank you, Tony. That's ideal. Yeah. That's ideal. Obviously, very conscious of time, but we're going to have one last question, which I'm going to throw over to Ralph Chiami. Ralph, you already indicated you want to answer this one. So, are you able to easily apply the carbon sequestration valuation techniques used in the original IMF paper to other species? Over to you, Ralph.
So the quick answer is, of course. By the way, just to showcase what this technique is and how different is it from other techniques. When conservation, by the way, there are valuation techniques out there, but and before we came onto the scene, and when we came onto the scene, we were financial economists. We come from the markets, but the valuation techniques were used by NGOs, foundations, activists, and governments to engage and come up with what is usually they like to call shadow price. What was left out of it is the markets, because the markets were not there. So the markets speak a completely different language. When you want to do evaluation and you want to go to the markets, the first thing the market participants are going to say, where do you come up with that price? If you say, well, I did a household survey and I asked reveal preferences, no, I need to know where that price is coming from. So when we do the valuation of whether it's species, or now we're doing, you know, elephants and forest elephants and whales and others, we are using market prices, markets that already exist. So that's why when we approached the whale, we looked at what are these services that markets already exist and price already is there. We did not come up with new prices. We used the markets that already exist. So we looked at carbon sequestration, impact on fish stocks, and whale tourism, for which ticket prices already existed. Meaning we did the minimum. So when I say the value of ecosystem services of a whale is 2 million, that's only minimum. The upper bound, as we bring more ecosystem services to the market, then we add more cash flows, and as a result, the price only can go up. So it's you're only surprised on the upside, not on the downside. That's one. Two, what differentiates our technique is that previous treatments of value of nature way undervalued nature because they were static analyses. They were looking at either they look at quantity multiplied by price, or they looked at 5 year, 10 years. Whereas what we do, we follow, for example, let's take the elephants, since we're talking about the elephants. We follow the elephants through its lifetime as it picks up ability to add more carbon into the forest. But the elephant gives life to new babies. Some of them survive, don't survive. So we are following a living asset. And this is very important to understand throughout its lifetime. And what you do, you're writing that convex curve, calculating all these cash flows and then discounting to the present. Eventually, everything has an upper bound. So it looks like a logistic model. It's convex, then becomes concave. And then you discount properly to the present. That's how you pick up the incredible value that nature provides. Let me give you just one example. By applying this technique, We were hired recently by UNEP to value seagrass worldwide. The value of seagrass just in carbon sequestration using this technique is $1.5 trillion. When you add the flood control aspects of a living and thriving seagrass, you're adding $2 more trillion. When you look at the impact of seagrass on the quality of fishes, and this is what the scientists in Australia already know, that when you have thriving seagrass, you have better fish, better quality of fish. You're adding multiples to that. That technique is brand new. That is ours that we use within Rebalance to value the elephants throughout their lifetime. We sat down with Fabio, who knows this inside out. He's the scientist, and we built that model with him because we need the scientists there. So we can apply it to any system, any living system, but you're valuing life. You're valuing the services that come from a living, not a dead, system. That's what's important. Now, beyond this valuation, what is very important to understand that every system has an upper bound. Every system has a carrying capacity. Should we stop investing in it just because it reached capacity to capture carbon? And the answer is no. We have a moral and ethical obligation to look after the natural asset beyond its carrying capacity. So the model that we developed with Rebalance is what would you have to pay today to make sure that we look after the elephants in perpetuity? What we're really saying is this is not a carbon play, folks. This is not about technology to offset carbon. Much more than that. This is about creating equity investors. That's why Walid was saying partners. We are partnering with Cardless. We're partnering with whoever wants to take an equity stake in our world, in our nature. And you become an investor in nature. You go from being a pure consumer of negative carbon to investor. And for sustainability officers, such as Ben, what you're looking at, you're hitting SDG 1, 3, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all of them, because you are alleviating poverty. You are creating employment. You are investing in natural capital. You see, you are, of course, what you get as also as a benefit, you get to offset your carbon footprint. So it's much more than just basically, we're not competing with a high-tech technology that says, well, I have this machine, it'll grab carbon for you, pump it into the ocean. Of course, somebody should ask them, is it the right thing to pump it into the ocean just because you can? I'll stop there.
Ralph, sorry to interrupt. We could run a whole webinar with you talking about the virtues. That's all the questions for today. I've taken notes of all the questions we didn't get answered, but I'll combine those with the answers we did get. We'll be putting out a blog post just to answer, cover all that stuff for you guys. At the moment, I'm just putting all the links you need for our website, our community, where you can keep up with Kathy's soon trip in Gabon. Obviously, follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, all those places. So that's going into the chat right now. From Walid's call to action, I'm just going to put in here a link to the form as well, which will obviously be hopefully we'll make sure it goes to LinkedIn and Twitter as well afterwards. That if you're interested as a partner, if you've got skills to impart, or if you just want to pass along and be the next GoCardless in terms of making your ESG officer aware, then this is the form you need to fill in, and we'll make sure you get all those materials. But I'll stop and let Walid give a closing mention because it's getting late for some people.
Thank you, Red, and thank you again, like I said earlier on, to all of you attendees, to our partners, to our customer, to my team. You guys have all been amazing. We couldn't have achieved this, without all of you. And I'm so excited about what we've got planned for 2022, and I can't wait to launch this pilot. So feel free to join us, feel free to track us, feel free to hold us accountable. We're here for you, and we're going to make a difference for this year. Thank you again, everybody, and we'll be seeing you next time.